They say trust is the foundation of every good relationship, and I believe that. For 67 years, I believed it with everything I had. My name is Harold Miller. I spent 32 years as a firefighter in this community. I walked into burning buildings. I carried strangers out of the smoke. I never once asked for a thank you. But none of that, not a single act of courage or service, prepared me for the day I discovered that the man I called my closest friend had stolen my home right out under me. A tax notice, that's all it took. A piece of paper slipped through the mail slot on a cold Tuesday morning, and in that moment, my entire world cracked open. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you love, this story is for you. My name is Harold Miller, and this is the story of how I lost everything, and then took it all back. But that was just the beginning of my plan.
My wife, Eleanor, used to say I was the kind of man who built things, not just with wood and nails, but with time and patience. She wasn't wrong. After I retired from the fire department, I didn't know what to do with myself. 40 years of running toward danger, and suddenly there was nothing but quiet mornings and an empty kitchen. Eleanor passed 2 years before I retired. Pancreatic cancer, fast and cruel. She was gone in 4 months. Our daughter, Diane, lived 40 minutes away with her husband and our granddaughter, Lily. Lily was 10 at the time. She had Eleanor's eyes, this warm, steady brown that made you feel like you were being held. I threw myself into the house. Eleanor and I had always talked about converting the garage into a woodworking space, so I did it. Took me 6 months, but I built it with my own hands, a proper workshop with good tools and good light. I started small. Birdhouses, picture frames, little toys for Lily. And then the neighbors started noticing. "Harold, would you teach me how to do that?" That's what Marge from next door said one afternoon, watching me sand a rocking chair on the driveway. I thought about it for a week, and then I opened up the garage on Saturday mornings. Within a month, I had 12 regulars, retired folks mostly, some younger ones too. We called it Miller's Workshop. Nothing fancy. Just a place where people could come, make something with their hands, and feel useful. That's when Roger Calloway came back into my life. Roger and I had known each other since our 30s. We'd served on the same volunteer board for years. He was charming, well-dressed, always had a joke ready. He'd moved away for a decade for work, but when he returned to town, he showed up at my workshop one Saturday with a bottle of good bourbon and a wide smile. "Harold," he said, clapping me on the shoulder, "you've built something real here. I'd love to help you grow it." I was flattered. I won't pretend otherwise. Roger had a background in small business management. He offered to handle the finances, donations, supply orders, insurance. He said it would free me up to do what I did best, teach. I signed a few papers. Roger said they were just for liability purposes. I trusted him completely. That was my mistake. The first sign came in February, about 5 months after Roger took over the books. I noticed that a few of the supply invoices looked different. The totals were higher than what I remembered ordering. But Roger had an explanation for everything. "Prices went up, Harold. Lumber's expensive right now. Don't worry about it. I've got it handled." I nodded and went back to sanding. Looking back, I can see how deliberately I was being steered away from the details. A kind word here, a reassurance there. Roger was good at it. He'd had practice. The second sign came in March. Diane called me. "Dad, did you refinance the house?" My stomach dropped. "No," I said. "Why would I do that?" There was a pause. "Because there's a public record filing with your address. It looks like a second mortgage was opened in January." I told her she must be mistaken. I told her I would look into it. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I pulled out the papers Roger had given me in September. I spread them on the kitchen table and read every line, really read them this time. My hands started shaking. Buried in the third document, in language so dense it looked like boilerplate, was a clause that gave Rogers LLC signatory authority over any financial instruments tied to the workshop property.
And because I had listed the garage workshop as an extension of my home address, the clause effectively gave him access to my home's equity. He had taken out a second mortgage in my name, and the funds had been transferred to an account I'd never seen before. I sat down on the kitchen floor, right there on the linoleum, and I just sat. If you've ever had the ground disappear beneath your feet, not from shock, but from the slow, sick understanding of how it happened, you know what I mean. It wasn't just the money. It was the years. It was the trust. It was the handshake over bourbon and the Saturday mornings and every moment I had believed in that man. Diane came over that afternoon. She was furious, sharp, protective anger that only daughters have for their fathers. "We're going to the police, Dad, tonight." "I know, but not yet." She stared at me. "What do you mean, not yet?" I didn't answer right away. I was thinking about Roger, about how calm he always was, how prepared, how 3 steps ahead. If I went to the police with what I had, he would smile, produce his own documents, and paint me as a confused old man who'd misunderstood what he'd signed. I needed more. I needed everything. That's when my granddaughter Lily came in from the backyard. She must have heard us talking because she walked straight to me, took my hand in both of hers, and said, "Grandpa, you're not a bad person, and bad things shouldn't just get to happen to good people." She was 12 years old. I looked at my daughter. I looked at Lily, and something quiet and solid settled in my chest. I was done being still.
I've been in burning buildings. I've crawled through rooms I couldn't see, with heat pressing down on me like a physical weight. And the thing they teach you, the thing that keeps you alive, is that panic is the enemy. Methodical is what saves you. I applied that same discipline to what came next. The first person I called was Tommy Briggs, a retired firefighter I'd worked with for 15 years. Tommy had become a paralegal after his retirement, working with a firm that specialized in elder law. He drove out the next morning. He sat at my kitchen table for 2 hours reading every document. When he finally looked up, his face was careful and controlled. "Harold, this is bad, but it's fixable. The key is documentation. We need to prove intent, that he deliberately misled you about what you were signing." "How do we do that?" "We find other victims." That word hit me like cold water. Other victims. The possibility that I wasn't the only one hadn't fully formed in my mind yet. The second person I called was Marcus Webb. Marcus was 29 years old, had a master's degree in accounting, and had been coming to my workshop every Saturday for 8 months. He lived 2 streets over and had the kind of methodical mind that could find a discrepancy in a spreadsheet the way I could find a crack in a wall. I told Marcus everything. He didn't flinch. "Give me 2 weeks," he said. Marcus found 4 other victims within 10 days. Roger Calloway had been running the same scheme for years, targeting retirees, men and women who owned their homes outright, who had modest savings but significant equity, and who were trusting enough to hand over paperwork duties to an old friend. There was a retired school teacher in Ridgewood, a widower who'd run a small nursery business, a couple in their 70s who had let Roger manage the books for their church's community fund. Each of them had signed documents they didn't fully understand. Each of them had money quietly redirected. Each of them had been left feeling ashamed, as if their age was the problem, as if their trust was the failure. I was angry. I want to be honest about that. There were nights when the anger sat on my chest like a stone, and I had to remind myself that what I was feeling was righteous and what I was doing was right. But I did not let Roger know any of it. For 2 more months, I played the part of the oblivious old man. I smiled at Roger at our weekly check-ins. I thanked him for his help. I let him feel completely safe. Meanwhile, Tommy worked with an attorney to build a civil case. Marcus compiled a meticulous financial record showing the pattern of transfers, and the other victims, once they understood they were not alone, agreed to come forward. If you've ever had to hold your feelings completely still while everything inside you is churning, you know how long those 2 months were. But I learned something important in those months. I learned the difference between revenge and justice. Revenge is hot. It feels good for a moment. It's a slammed door, a shouted accusation, a public scene that leaves everyone shaken. Justice is cold. It's patient. It waits until the case is airtight, and then it walks through the door quietly, and it doesn't leave. I was going to do this right. Our community workshop held an annual spring gathering, a Saturday afternoon where families came. We displayed the work made throughout the year, and the neighborhood came together. Roger had helped plan this year's event. He was going to speak. I decided that was exactly the right moment. The morning of the community gathering, I woke before sunrise. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table where Eleanor and I used to do the crossword puzzle on Sunday mornings. I thought about her. I thought about what she would say. She would have said, "Harold, make sure you're doing this for the right reasons." And I was. Not for pride, not for spectacle, for the 4 other families who had lost money they couldn't afford to lose, for the trust that Roger had systematically dismantled in each of us, for every person who had been told, explicitly or implicitly, that their age made them an easy target. Diane arrived at 9. Marcus came at 10 with a laptop and a portable projector. Tommy came with an attorney named Patricia Greer, who had filed the formal complaint with the county prosecutor's office 3 days earlier. 2 plainclothes detectives were parked down the street. We had timed everything carefully. The community gathering started at noon. About 80 people came, neighbors, former students from the workshop, families. The yard was full of the things we'd built together, shelves and frames and small chairs, and a beautiful oak table that Marge had finished just last month. Harold arrived at 12:30, wearing a pressed blazer and carrying a plate of store-bought cookies. He shook hands, laughed at people's jokes, told a story about a fishing trip. He hadn't changed at all. At 1 o'clock, I stepped to the front of the gathering and asked for everyone's attention. "I want to thank you all for being here," I said. "This workshop has meant more to me than I can express. It started as a way to keep myself busy after Eleanor died, but it became something much larger than me. It became ours." People smiled. A few nodded. "But there's something else I need to say today, something I should have said sooner. And I'm sorry it took me this long to find the right words." I looked at Roger. He was still smiling, that confident, easy smile. Over the past few months, I discovered that someone I trusted completely had been using my trust against me. He forged my signature on financial documents. He took out a loan against my home without my knowledge. He redirected funds from this workshop into his own accounts. The yard went quiet. He did the same thing to 4 other families in this community and the surrounding area. A retired teacher, a widower, a church fund. Marcus clicked on the projector. The documents appeared on the white sheet we'd hung from the fence. Bank transfer records, side-by-side signature comparisons, account statements. Roger's smile disappeared. "Harold," he started. "I'm not finished," I said. My voice was steady. I want you to know that. My voice did not shake. "I'm not telling you this to embarrass anyone. I'm telling you this because silence is how this keeps happening. Because people like me, people who should know better, feel ashamed that they were fooled. And that shame is exactly what people like Roger Calloway depend on." The 2 detectives walked through the gate. Roger looked at them. He looked at me. And for just a moment, just a fraction of a second, I saw something cross his face that wasn't anger or denial. It was the realization that it was over. He was placed under arrest quietly, without a struggle. Patricia Greer handed the lead detective a folder containing everything: the original fraudulent documents, the financial records Marcus had compiled, and sworn statements from all 5 victims. The yard was very still. And then Marge, 68 years old, retired school librarian, maker of the finest oak table I'd ever seen, started to clap. Slowly at first. Then others joined. I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that too. I felt something quieter, something closer to relief. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you love, you know that the ending of the story is never what you imagined when you were in the middle of the pain. The fantasy is loud and sharp. The reality is something more like exhaling after you've been holding your breath for months. That's what it felt like.
The legal process took 8 months. Roger Calloway was charged with financial elder abuse, forgery, and fraud. 5 counts total, 1 for each victim. His attorney tried to negotiate a reduced charge by arguing that the documents were ambiguous and that we had misunderstood the agreements. Patricia Greer dismantled that argument carefully, systematically, and completely. The jury deliberated for 2 days. On a Thursday morning in October, the 4 women stood and read the verdict. Guilty, on all counts. I was sitting in the second row of the courtroom, between Diane and Tommy. Lily wasn't there, she was in school, but I had promised to call her the moment it was done. When the verdict came through, I sat very still for a moment. Diane took my hand. "Dad," she said quietly. "I know," I said. I called Lily from the courthouse steps. "Grandpa," she said immediately, "what happened?" "Guilty. All of it." There was a long pause on the line, and then she said, "Good. I'm proud of you." That's the moment I cried. Not in the courtroom, not when the verdict was read, but standing on the courthouse steps in the October air, hearing my 12-year-old granddaughter tell me she was proud of me. The restitution order required Roger to repay all 5 victims in full. My home equity was restored. The other families received their funds back with interest. But more than the money, and I want to say this clearly because the money matters, but it isn't the whole story, what was restored was harder to calculate. It was the sense that the world could be made right again, that the systems we sometimes doubt, the legal ones, the communal ones, could actually function, that speaking up, even when it was frightening, even when it felt impossible, was worth it. Several neighbors came to me after the verdict. Some of them were people who had whispered behind my back when the story first broke, who had assumed, as people sometimes do, that my age explained my situation. "Harold," one of them said, gripping my hand, "I'm sorry I doubted you." "I know, I understand." And I did. I understood it, and I let it go. That's the part no one talks about in these stories, the letting go. Because it turns out the people who wronged you are not the hardest thing to release. It's the version of yourself that was naive enough to be wronged in the first place. That's the one you have to be patient with. I worked on that for a long time. That spring, I reopened the workshop. I changed the name. The sign above the garage door now reads, Second Chance Workshop. It wasn't my idea, actually. It was Marcus's. He came to me a few weeks after the trial and said, "Harold, what you built here, the community part of it, not the legal part, that's the thing worth keeping. What if we made it about second chances, for people who got burned, for young people who need a place to land?" I thought about it for exactly 1 day. Now, on Tuesday evenings, we hold a free class specifically for seniors who have experienced financial fraud. We talk about the warning signs. We talk about the shame, how it works, why it's so effective, and why it is not the victim's fault. We talk about how to ask for help. On Saturday mornings, the workshop is open as it's always been, but now we also host a mentorship pairing. Retired tradespeople teaching young adults practical skills, carpentry, basic electrical, plumbing fundamentals, things that make a person less dependent, more confident. Marge runs the Tuesday sessions with the same steady competence she brings to everything. Tommy helps coordinate with the county attorney's office for people who need legal referrals. Marcus does a quarterly financial literacy workshop, free of charge. Lily comes most Saturdays now. She's learning to make furniture. Last month, she finished a small bookshelf, clean joints, good finish, solid as anything.
She stood back and looked at it for a long time. "Grandpa," she said, "do you think I can make a rocking chair eventually?" "Eventually?" I said. "I think you can make one by summer." She grinned, Eleanor's eyes, warm and steady. I think about Rogers sometimes, not with the hot feeling I had in those first months, that burning, sleepless anger. I think about him the way you think about a hard winter. It happened, it was real, and you came through it differently than you went in. He's serving a 4-year sentence. I don't wish him ill, I don't wish him well either, I just don't carry him with me anymore. The thing I keep returning to is this: the betrayal was real, and the damage was real, and none of that will ever be unhappened. But what we built after it, the Tuesday sessions, the Saturday pairings, the bookshelf Lily made with her own careful hands, that's real too. Maybe more real because it was chosen. I still make things in the workshop every morning before anyone else arrives. It's quiet and good. The wood smells the same as it always did. My hands know what they're doing. Eleanor always said I was the kind of man who built things. I think she was right. I don't know what I expected justice to feel like. I thought it would feel like victory, loud and clean, but it feels more like mourning, quiet, gradual, something you have to stand still long enough to notice. I stood still long enough. I told Lily on one of those Saturday mornings what I had learned through all of it. Justice isn't about anger, I said. It's about refusing to give up. She nodded, like she was filing it away, like she already understood. Maybe she did. Maybe that's what it looks like when something gets passed down, not a name or a piece of furniture, but a way of moving through the world. Steady, methodical, unwilling to let wrong things stay wrong. That day, justice was finally served. And for the first time in a long time, maybe the first time since Eleanor, I felt free. What would you have done?